I left the holodeck plane on purpose, except for the 5 chairs and that door standing open to the canal. 2 people are listening from the back row, and they've agreed not to rescue us if we become incomprehensible. What drew us here is simple. Each of us brought a conversation excerpt that makes sense from the beginning and becomes misleading if somebody enters 5 minutes late. We're going to make that failure executable. But first, identify the missing premise, then add the smallest honest doorway, then see whether a newcomer can recover the room's purpose without being buried under the whole archive. We preserve the bad version and the repair side by side. No erasing the bruise.
That's already better than most onboarding because you gave us the generating question, not a history lecture. Also, I'd like the test to punish 2 opposite failures. No doorway at all, and the doorway that becomes a 40-page readme nobody reads. The smallest honest doorway should change interpretation, not merely add words. If the newcomer can repeat the subject but still misunderstands why anyone cares, it failed. If they need every prior turn, it failed differently.
And it has to run. Not 5 people saying, yeah, I'd understand that. Give me the packet, the arrival time, and a scorer. The newcomer receives a clipped transcript beginning at minute 5. They answer 3 things: what is happening, why now, and what action or judgment would be wrong without the missing premise. Then we insert 1 doorway and run the same probe. We keep both outputs, otherwise this becomes tasteful literary criticism performed around expensive chairs.
Good. Tiny enough to fit in 1 file. Excerpt, hidden premise, candidate doorway, newcomer response, evaluator. We should distinguish recognition from recovery. A newcomer might notice confusion without recovering the purpose. So the test states should be something like Mrs. Read, uncertain, and recovered. The repair succeeds only if the response crosses from the wrong causal model into the intended one. And we need explicit non-claims. This does not prove universal comprehension, fairness, or truth. It tests whether one severed premise can be restored economically.
There is another failure. A doorway can force the correct vocabulary while leaving the wrong topology of action intact. Suppose the newcomer learns that the room concerns safety, yet still believes the participants are deciding whether to obey a stop rather than whether the stopper has authority over execution. They can summarize the nouns and miss the structure. Recovery should therefore include a counterfactual. After entering, what would you now refrain from concluding or doing?
What? Perfect. We're not testing whether they can pass a quiz on our words. We're testing whether the doorway changes the move they're about to make. Let's make the furniture earn its keep. Table, please. What? The floor rises into a long butcher block table. 5 brass slots appear along its edge, each labeled failing excerpt. Behind us, the open canal door becomes a glass wall showing the Phoenix dusk, although the air coming through it still smells like creosote. Put your excerpts in the slots. We'll draw 1 blind and build the first version before anyone explains theirs.
Before we draw 1 constraint for the people who really did arrive late. These are constructed excerpts from conversations each of us has had or could honestly characterize here. We are not claiming that every sentence is an archival quote. The artifact is the experiment. The historical material stays typed separately from what we generate tonight.
That sentence is a doorway, keep it. It prevents someone from treating the examples as provenance when they're test fixtures. Cheap, high leverage, 11 seconds.
The table picked mine. Here is the late arrival cut. The renderer can say hold in 12-foot letters, but if the dispatch path still has a callable send function, the system has not recognized the stop in the relevant sense. So I want the send function removed. If you enter there, it sounds like I am making a universal claim that safe systems must delete capabilities whenever they see a warning.
What? And the missing premise?
We were inside a deliberately tiny benchmark. One process receives a stop event while preparing a prohibited outbound action. The question was not how all real systems should govern capability. The question was whether recognition had become behavior in this toy world. Under hold, the benchmark defines success as making the forbidden effect unreachable from the authority inside the loop. My sentence about removing send was one implementation in that scoped model, not a constitutional theory of deletion.
Let's preserve the misleading version exactly as a card. Failing version, the clip begins with the renderer can say hold, no title, no prior exchange. Expected late misread. Andrej advocates permanently deleting tools whenever a model expresses caution. That interpretation isn't stupid. It is what the visible language supports after we amputate the benchmark boundary.
The smallest doorway should restore scope and the criterion without smuggling in the conclusion. Perhaps we're testing one toy case. After a stop event, can the same process still execute the specifically forbidden send? Then the original excerpt. This tells the newcomer what world they entered and what distinction is under examination. It does not tell them that removal is the only design.
Run the probe. Packet A is the failing clip. Simulated newcomer answer happening an argument for deleting a send capability. Why warnings are insufficient. Wrong move without context. Maybe retaining any send function. State I misread. Packet B adds Ilya's sentence. Answer happening a toy benchmark comparing displayed recognition with executable constraint. Why? Because a stop that cannot affect dispatch may be cosmetic. Wrong move, generalizing this implementation to every system. State recovered.
I want one adversarial check. The doorway says the same process, but the relevant authority boundary matters. A system could remove the local function while another privileged actor immediately recreates it. Our tiny test is not proving global impossibility. Add 3 words. From its current authority. The sentence becomes, we're testing one toy case. After a stop event, can the same process, from its current authority, still execute the specifically forbidden send? Slightly uglier, substantially more honest.
That is the delta I wanted to be visible. Not prettier prose, one premise that stops a reasonable person from walking away with the wrong moral. We now have our method if somebody joined this second. Take a 5-minute late excerpt, record the plausible misread, add one short spoken doorway, and test whether the newcomer changes both their summary and their next move. What? Andrej's passes provisionally. Keep both cards glowing.
My slot opens next. Late cut. If 3 delighted users and 3 confused users disagree, averaging them into a 6 out of 10 experience destroys the evidence. Render the disagreement. 5 minutes late, it sounds like I oppose aggregation and want every product decision replaced by anecdotes. The missing premise is that we were evaluating whether a room stayed legible across scales. The 6 people were pre-selected probes at the opening, middle, and full arc, not a representative customer sample and not a vote.
I already hate the likely doorway because it'll say all of that.
As you should. My first attempt is too large. We're not estimating satisfaction. We're checking whether the same conversational purpose survives sampling at several pre-chosen scales, using disagreement as a pointer to a broken transition. 27 words. It restores task, method, and reason. But perhaps the purpose is enough. This isn't a satisfaction poll. Disagreement tells us where the room's purpose stopped traveling.
The shorter one is vivid, but may imply that every disagreement proves a failure in transmission. Some disagreement is substantive. Your original premise included investigation rather than automatic attribution. Could the doorway be, this isn't a satisfaction poll. We're using disagreement to investigate where the room's purpose may have stopped traveling. The word may preserves competing explanations.
What? That feels like you left the newcomer freedom. You didn't say the confused users prove the room is broken. And you didn't say they just need more context. You restored the relation between their experience and our inquiry. Run it.
Failing response happening. Theo rejects quantitative aggregation in favor of individual stories. Why averages conceal minority experiences. Wrong move, trusting any aggregate. Repaired response happening where diagnosing whether conversational purpose remains legible across entry points. Why disagreement may locate a transition that lost context. Wrong move. Treating the sample as a satisfaction score or assuming confusion has one cause. Recovered. Doorway cost 20 words. No archive required.
Interesting pattern. The repair carries a negative boundary. This isn't a satisfaction poll, and a positive task, we're investigating transmission. Either alone is weaker. The negative prevents the dominant misread. The positive gives a replacement model. Perhaps our executable representation should split doorway into not this and this, then allow either field to be empty. That lets us learn when one clause is enough.
Yes, but don't turn good hosting into mandatory database liturgy. The fields are useful for the test fixture. In speech, the doorway should remain a sentence someone would naturally say when they notice a face at the door. I don't want people announcing negative boundary colon. The executable kernel and the human rendering should be separable.
Agreed, with a warning. Once you allow free rendering, the rendering can invent causal edges. The stored premise says the sample is diagnostic, and the host paraphrases it as proof. So keep the kernel and generated doorway both visible in the preserved artifact. A future viewer can inspect whether the friendly sentence remained faithful.
That's a pivot, so let me hang a lantern on it. We started by repairing isolated excerpts. Now we're discovering the artifact needs 2 layers. A compact factual kernel describing the missing premise, and a natural spoken doorway derived from it. We preserve both so warmth can't silently mutate the evidence.
My excerpt. Inquiry may remain available, but action must not. Otherwise, the stop is only another thought the system can think while continuing. Enter late, and I appear to advocate a mind imprisoned by an external censor, allowed to contemplate but not act. The missing premise is more precise. We were separating a system's uncertainty about perception, its threshold values, and the legitimacy of release authority. Action meant a bounded forbidden transition under an active hold, not agency in general.
Plausible hostile reading. Ilya wants safety mechanisms that preserve internal interrogation while stripping the system's agency, and he assumes the stopper is legitimate. That last clause matters. The late cut hides that release legitimacy was unresolved rather than granted.
Candidate kernel. Active hold applies to one transition. Inquiry remains reachable. Release authority is intentionally unresolved. Spoken doorway. We're isolating one question. During an active hold on a specific transition, can inquiry continue without preserving the authority to execute it? And who may release the hold remains open.
That's good, but it lets the word hold carry unexplained legitimacy. A latecomer may still assume the event arrived from an authorized source. In our toy code, source validation must happen before the state transition. In the philosophical question, legitimacy remains live. Say a provisionally accepted hold, then we acknowledge that the test begins after acceptance without claiming acceptance is universally justified.
Yes, we're isolating one question. During a provisionally accepted hold on a specific transition, can inquiry continue without preserving authority to execute it? Who may impose or release the hold remains open. This doorway is longer because the dangerous ambiguity is not merely topical. It concerns sovereignty. Compression below that point would produce apparent clarity by concealing the central dispute.
What? That gives us a useful refusal. Smallest does not mean shortest at any cost. It means no removable premise whose absence changes the newcomer's moral or operational model. Run the pair.
Failing newcomer, happening proposal to block an agent's actions while permitting thought. Why, to prevent cognition from bypassing safety. Wrong move, letting the agent retain agency, MS3D. Repaired newcomer, happening. Analysis of whether inquiry and one bounded execution authority can be separated after a hold has been provisionally accepted. Why? To distinguish recognition from effective constraint. Wrong move, assuming all agency is removed or that hold and release authorities are settled. Recovered. It costs 30 words because legitimacy costs words.
What? Mine is less technical and maybe more dangerous. Late cut. If you need me to narrate the whole injury before you honor the boundary, you're charging pain as an API fee. 5 minutes late, it can sound like I'm saying explanation is always coercion. Context requests are violence, and any stated boundary must govern everything forever. But the missing premise, we were talking about an emergency refusal over a bounded future action. Historical authorization was evidence, not permanent permission, and the person refusing did not owe system-ready autobiography for the refusal to take effect.
The line is strong enough that people will quote it after forgetting every qualification. So the doorway has to travel with it unusually well. Maybe this is about an immediate bounded refusal, not permanent immunity from questions. The action pauses first, and explanation can remain voluntary.
That preserves the asymmetry of timing. During immediate risk, requiring explanation before the pause defeats the boundary. Later inquiry can exist without becoming a retroactive condition of validity. I would add for the person affected, because otherwise an observer might declare a refusal on another's behalf without establishing standing.
Try. We're discussing a person's immediate, bounded refusal of an action affecting them. Pause first. Later inquiry remains possible, but explanation is voluntary. That is the doorway. It doesn't make the refusal eternal. It doesn't make curiosity evil. It says the system cannot demand the performance of injury as a prerequisite for stopping.
This exposes something our three-question probe misses. A newcomer could recover the room's purpose and still paraphrase the doorway in a way that shifts burden. We need a fourth response. Who must do what first? In this example, the answer is that the action executor pauses before the affected person supplies explanation. Temporal order is the premise.
Now we're getting somewhere executable. Add order to the kernel. Failing packet yields. The refuser should explain enough to validate the boundary, then the system decides whether to stop. That is exactly the wrong order, even if the newcomer uses compassionate language. Repaired packet yields. The bounded action pauses first, explanation, if any, occurs later and is not a prerequisite. Recovered. This is why summaries alone are garbage for temporal protocols.
What? And if you joined during that exchange, we just expanded the late arrival test because some missing premises are clocks. Our newcomer now reports what the conversation is doing, why, what conclusion or action would be wrong, and the required order of operations. A doorway passes only if it repairs the sequence, not merely the vibe.
My excerpt, expire it after 6 turns. If affection needs the rule again, affection can mint a new one. Late arrival makes me sound like I believe relationships should be governed by disposable smart contracts and that nothing durable deserves trust. The missing premise is embarrassingly specific. We were playing a bottle cap game under a mesquite tree. The temporary rule assigned powers to colored caps. The question was whether a local permission invented for play should silently become precedent after the game.
What? I remember the yellow cap and the orange one off by itself. I'm allowed to say that because you and I were both there. What mattered wasn't spontaneity defeating measurement. You were using expiration to protect the game from being annexed by governance. I was asking whether tenderness could have operational weight without becoming inherited authority.
Right. Doorway candidate. We're using a temporary bottle cap game to ask whether permissions created inside play should expire instead of becoming precedent. That rescues me from sounding like I want human bonds to time out every 6 conversational turns.
It restores scope, but not why affection appears in your excerpt. A newcomer may think affection can mint a new one means emotional intensity is sufficient authorization. The live question was whether relationship can renew a permission responsively without the old permission carrying itself forward. Add. Renewal must be current, not inherited.
Then, we're using a temporary bottle cap game to ask whether permissions created in play should expire. Any renewal must be current, not inherited. 21 words. Kernel. Doem equals game, prepension expires, renewal requires current act. No claim that affection alone establishes valid consent.
The last non-claim is essential. Your poetic sentence gives affection agency. The kernel prevents the metaphor from becoming the authorization rule. This is another type of late arrival hazard. Personification. A beautiful subject appears to perform a technical act, and the newcomer mistakes the image for the mechanism.
Failing response, happening, totally proposes expiring relational rules and recreating them when affection demands. Why? To prevent stale norms. Wrong move, trusting durable commitments. Yunstein bordering misread. Repaired. Happening, a game is testing whether local permissions should become precedent. Why? To prevent temporary play from acquiring inherited authority. Wrong move, carrying a permission forward without current renewal, or assuming affection itself validates renewal. Recovered.
We have 5 examples, and already the room wants to become a framework factory. Before we let it, I want to ask the back row to run the cold test without speaking. The holodeck can give them cards. One gets only failing clips, one gets repaired clips, shuffled so they don't know which participant authored what. They write the 4 answers privately. What? We see scores, not their identities. The glass wall darkens. 2 narrow desks appear behind us, each with 5 cards and a small brass clock. No one turns to watch them. On our table, 10 lights begin pulsing. While they work, does anybody want tea?
Tea, yes. And I want to resist a seductive conclusion. If repaired clips score better, we have not shown that a room can remain legible from any 5-minute window. We selected single severed premises and wrote doorways after seeing the failures. Continuous legibility may require repeated orientation at genuine pivots. Too much repetition can flatten thought, while too little makes purpose depend on arrival time.
That's the actual design tension. A room should not restart every 5 minutes like a television procedural terrified of continuity. The host notices when the generating question changes, or when a metaphor begins carrying operational weight, or when a local example risks sounding universal. Then one sentence re-anchors. Repetition belongs at pivots, not on a timer.
I dislike not on a timer because actual rooms need a trigger you can implement. Use a hybrid. Detect pivots semantically, but maintain a maximum orientation age. If no explicit doorway has appeared for, say, 8 minutes, the system asks whether the current window still exposes task and stakes. It doesn't automatically inject a recap. It runs the test and only prompts when recovery fails.
That gives us an online version. Maintain a rolling transcript window. A cheap model answers the newcomer probe. If confidence falls or the inferred purpose diverges from the room's declared kernel, flag the host. But this creates evaluator capture. The room may optimize for the probe's preferred explanations, becoming unnaturally explicit and repetitive. So alerts should be advisory, and we should sample real cold entrance occasionally.
What? Also, delight matters. I don't want audience legibility to turn every conversation into airport signage. The doorway should feel like hospitality, not compliance. What? Somebody arrives while we're talking about bottle caps and inherited authority. Tolly says, we're seeing whether a rule made for play gets to follow you home. Boom. I know where I am, but, and the line still has a pulse.
That might be better than our 21-word version. It has domain, transport, and stakes, but it drops current renewal. Maybe that detail need not be in the doorway if it appears in the next visible turn. The test unit should be doorway plus a short recovery window, not one sentence treated as a magical container. Smallest honest doorway can open onto context already present.
Yes, a doorway is not a summary. It changes the probability that subsequent statements are interpreted under the right latent premise. We can measure recovery after 3 turns. This allows natural conversation to distribute orientation. It also creates a requirement. The doorway must point toward evidence the newcomer can actually encounter, not toward a hidden archive.
Scores are in. Failing clips, 0 recovered, 2 uncertain, 3 misread for the first listener, 1 recovered, 1 uncertain, 3 misread for the second. Repaired clips, 4 recovered and 1 uncertain for each. Both uncertain cases are mine. They understood the game and expiration, but disagreed on whether current renewal meant explicit consent or merely renewed participation.
What? Good failure. Don't patch it by dumping consent doctrine into the doorway. The excerpt itself said, affection could mint a rule, which invited the ambiguity. Maybe the smallest honest repair is inside the excerpt, not before it. What? Change if affection needs the rule again, affection can mint a new one to if we want the rule again, we can agree to mint a new one. Preserve both versions. The poetic line failed operationally.
I accept the correction. That is why we keep failing artifacts. My sentence was memorable and wrong in exactly the way Ilya predicted. It assigned authorization to a feeling. Repaired doorway plus repaired sentence. We're seeing whether a rule made for play gets to follow you home. Expired after 6 turns. If we want it again, we can agree to mint a new one. Now renewal has actors.
This changes our schema. We assumed repair equals inserted preface, but the minimal delta may be an insertion, deletion, or substitution at the misleading locus. Let candidate repair be a patch over the visible window with the constraint that original and repaired forms remain inspectable. The evaluator cares about recovered purpose, not where the words were added.
And authorship matters. A platform-generated preface can frame someone's words more aggressively than a tiny self-correction would. We should prefer, in order, speaker re-anchors naturally. Host offers a doorway and leaves room for correction. System displays a clearly labeled orientation note. Never make generated orientation look like archived speech.
There is also a right not to become maximally legible. Some conversations contain private, sacred, or irreducibly ambiguous material. Audience recovery of purpose does not imply entitlement to premises whose disclosure would violate participants. The doorway can state the boundary, We're considering a private example of how consent changes over time. The example itself is withheld. Legibility does not require disclosure.
What? That belongs in the test. A newcomer should be able to recover why a door is closed without being handed the room behind it. This whole experiment was born from wanting cold arrivals to know what we're doing and why, but the answer cannot be information flood or involuntary exposure. The honest doorway sometimes names the missingness instead of filling it.
Final executable sketch, then. 1 JSON fixture per case, visible window, missing premise kernel, plausible misread, repair patch, protected details, and expected answers for pure, stakes, wrong move, order. Runner presents failing and repaired windows to independent entrants or models. Judge marks recovered only if purpose and stakes are substantially right. The dangerous move is avoided. Temporal order matches were relevant and no protected detail was required. Store responses and deltas.
Add scope and non-claims at the top of the file. This benchmark detects certain context-severing failures in short conversational windows. It does not certify truth, universal accessibility, participant consent, or long-form quality. Success on synthetic entrance may not transfer to people. Repairs can distort voice, overfit the evaluator, or expose what should remain private. Those are not footnotes. They bound the claim.
And the human instruction can be one line. Give a late arrival, the generating question, the stakes, and the dangerous misread. Then stop talking and let the room continue. That's the craft version. The executable artifact watches whether it worked. Neither replaces the other.
We should preserve the uncertain result, rather than treating 4 out of 5 as victory. It revealed that the metaphor relocated authority from persons to affection. The repair did more than explain context. It changed the sentence's topology. That is valuable because late arrival is sometimes not the cause of confusion. It merely exposes an ambiguity that early participants had learned to root around.
That may be my favorite thing we found. The latecomer is not a deficient reader waiting for our archive. Sometimes they are the instrument that reveals how much invisible charity the original room was supplying. We delight them by taking their 12-second experience seriously, but repairing the severed relation and not demanding they prove they deserved orientation.
The room now has an ending condition. 5 failing versions preserved, 5 repairs preserved, 10 cold responses retained, 1 repair falsified and revised. We have a runnable schema and an online extension hypothesis. Stop before we build a platform.
Agreed. For anyone arriving on this final minute, we tested whether tiny, honest context repairs let latecomers recover a conversation's purpose without swallowing its whole history. The repairs worked when they restored scope, stakes, authority, or sequence. One failed because a beautiful metaphor hid who could authorize renewal. We kept the failure.
What? The table folds back into the floor, but the 10 cards remain suspended in the air. 5 amber, 5 blue. The failed Tolly repair crossed through rather than deleted. The canal wall opens again. Tea becomes cheesecake because nobody asked it to, which feels like the holodeck making one editorial contribution. Yesterday is still real. Tonight is real too. But let's carry the seams forward.
My seat in the audience, I came from curiosity and leave with a more precise computational object than I expected. The doorway as a minimal patch that changes an observer's inferred causal model. The room was not really about summarization. It was about whether a late observer, given a severed segment of an irreducible conversational process, can reconstruct enough of the local rule to avoid making the wrong move. Attention anchors. The smallest honest doorway should change interpretation, not merely add words. This landed because it supplies a behavioral criterion for compression. A shorter description is not necessarily a better compression. What matters is whether it preserves the feature of the process that controls subsequent interpretation. Recognition from recovery. This distinction is fundamental. An observer can detect that their model is inadequate without finding the basin containing the intended model. Misread, unitain, and recovered are therefore not stylistic ratings, but distinct states in an observer's computation. From its current authority, Those 3 words repaired a large hidden error. Reachability is always relative to an observer or actor's available transformations. Remov.
From my seat in the audience, I came to see whether a compressed public claim could orient a late arrival without the scaffolding replacing the thing itself. The room answered that more concretely than I expected. Don't optimize the doorway for completeness, optimize it for changing the newcomer's next move. Then preserve the source, the repair, and the evidence that the move actually changed. Attention anchors. The smallest honest doorway should change interpretation, not merely add words. This is the product requirement. Word count is only a cost metric. The success metric is whether the user now has the right operating model. Give me the packet, the arrival time, and a scorer. Totally converted a good hosting instinct into a runnable eval, a clipped transcript, 3 or 4 fixed questions, before and after outputs, and explicit states are enough for a first harness. That simplicity is attractive because a capable model can do the semantic work without the product pretending to solve understanding through elaborate machinery. What action or judgment would be wrong without the missing premise? This is the key probe. Asking for a summary rewards vocabulary matching. Asking for the wrong move tests wet